Welcome back, college football fans, to another edition of Over the Middle. And as always, we're brought to you by our friends at YourView. YourView is your home for the top high school football games across the country. If they're playing high school football this season, then YourView has you covered. Tune into your local YourView station. Plus, Cox TV customers can watch the games for free anywhere in the country. Download the Cox Contour app on the Apple App Store and on Google Play. Or you can head over to watch.yourview.com and sign up to watch the best games of the country. I'm excited about these games. This concludes a slew of great games on Friday, October 10th. The Ford game of the week on YourView Oklahoma features Norman North versus Moore. That's a great matchup. Then on YourView Nebraska, we've got Millard West versus Bellevue West. And for those that follow high school football in Nebraska and recruiting in the Midwest, they know that Bellevue West is where three-star athlete and Iowa commit Keegan Johnson plays. Plus, he's got a junior teammate, Micah Riley, that already has more than 20 offers, and many people assume he will end up in Iowa City too. Then on YourView Louisiana, we've got a great matchup between Terrebonne and Hahnville. And then on YourView's Game Time Arizona, we've got Liberty at Red Mountain, that big time. I mean, seriously, big time matchup featuring a ton of Pac-12 talent. And those are two of the better teams in the state of Arizona. All those games kick off at 7 p.m. local time on Friday, October 10th. So don't forget to tune into your local YourView station, download the Contra app, or log on to watch.yourview.com. For those new to the pod, I'm your host, Jeremy Crabtree, and I've spent the last 25 years, covering college football recruiting at Rivals.com, ESPN, and I'm currently at KNBC 9 News in Kansas City, where we've got a ton of great coverage locally in the Kansas City market. And over here at Over the Middle, we like to take a deep dive into the world where college football, recruiting, and high school football all intersect. And we're now 5 weeks deep into the college football season, and there's been plenty to digest already. The Big Ten's back, the Pac-12's back. More games have been canceled or delayed, and we've seen high school programs across the country continue to either have to go into quarantine, have games postponed, or have their seasons canceled outright. There's no question the coronavirus has had an impact on football and the world of recruiting like anything we've ever seen before. And that's why we're going to take deep dives into storylines that COVID-19 creates in college football and in recruiting. We've talked to K-State's Taylor Bratt, Michigan's Matt Dudek, Oscar Rodriguez at Akron, and last week we had Arizona's Cody Moore on about how they're handling recruiting efforts during a pandemic. But we thought we'd go a little bit different direction this week and talk about what I think is one of the most fascinating storylines, actually multiple storylines, in this whole pandemics and COVID-19 world and high school football world that we're living in. And it's coming out of the state of Iowa. Yes, you heard me right. Iowa, not California, not Texas, not Florida, is where some of the biggest coronavirus recruiting headlines and high school football related headlines are coming out. And to help us break it all down, I couldn't be more excited to be joined by Matthew Bain of the Des Moines Register. Matt, welcome into Over the Middle.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. And yes, it is interesting that this state is producing, like you said, the weirdest, most bizarre, most kind of eye-catching headlines related to this stuff right now.
So I kind of jokingly before we got on the air here said that you might have needed a law degree to cover high school football and recruiting in the state of Iowa. I mean, did you ever think that you would be talking to lawyers and dealing with legal briefs and things like that? And we'll talk about a little bit like that about why here in a second. But do you ever in your growing up and getting into journalism school think that you'd have to be dealing with law?
No, that's why I got into sports. I mean, that's why I didn't get into this. I would say over the past 2 to 3 weeks, I've had 80 to 90 phone calls with attorneys. I've looked at many different rulings. I've had to interpret many different rules that I didn't even know existed in the Iowa High School Athletic Association's handbook. It's been amazing. But hey, this is COVID times, man.
Yeah.
Reporters are suddenly becoming law reporters. That's just the way it works.
So let's set the stage and make it clear what's going on up in Iowa. For weeks now, you have been covering multiple angles. It's essentially the same story, but multiple angles of the same story. Several elite recruits moved into Iowa this football season because of the COVID-19 shutdown. Their season's back at home, and it's created a legal back and forth with the Iowa High School Athletic Association. Before we look at each situation, why were so many top level players going to Iowa in the first place? I mean, Iowa isn't the first place you would think immediately where you want to go play high school football at.
Well, I think it's because Iowa was one of the first states that always said, "Yep, we're playing in the fall, no matter what." So as states around the country like Illinois, Michigan, especially around the Midwest, as they started postponing their fall seasons, Iowa was kind of seen as a haven because it's close to
Mm.
Chicago. You got the Chicagoland area pretty close to Iowa. Michigan, you don't have to go too far down if you're in the Traverse City, Detroit area. So it made sense for the Midwest. But yeah, we got people from all over. And I think it's just because Iowa so early on was like, yep, we're
Yeah.
playing coronavirus, whatever, we're playing. So we got people from California, got some from Colorado, Jake Ruble, who we'll talk about, a really big name. Yeah, from all over. It's crazy.
So I think you've done a good job of explaining this in your work with the Des Moines Register, but help us understand what has been the Iowa High School Athletic Association stance on transfers in the past. Obviously,
Yeah.
we've never seen a time like this before, but each and every high school association has to deal with transfer questions every year. So help us kind of lay the foundation. What has been their stance on transfers in the past?
So the basic deal with out-of-state transfers and in-state transfers is the same thing. It needs to be a legitimate move that isn't only sports related. The entire family needs to move. It can't be like the situation where you just go rent an apartment somewhere with your dad or with your mom or something, and the rest stay behind. Um, but there are some exceptions too, and that's where all this coronavirus stuff came in. The exceptions are if there's a contemporaneous parental move. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, never thought I'd have to realize what that means. A contemporaneous parental move that the kid goes along with, and by golly, there's a lot of contemporaneous parental moves going on right now, then technically that would be an exception to the rule. So basically, what has happened is all these players have transferred into Iowa, and yes, probably talking to a reporter, they're going to say, "Oh, it was more reasons than just football, more reasons than just football," because they know the association is going to read that. Everybody knows that's a bunch
Yeah.
of baloney.
Yeah.
Everybody moves here for football, and that's just the way it is. So if the association was going to let some people play and then other people not play, which is what happened at the beginning, that's kind of where the tension happened. So if the association at first had said, "Here's a blanket statement, all seniors moving into Iowa who want to play their final season of high school football, as long as you live in the district, you're paying rent, you're in good
Mm.
academic standing, we'll let you play." This is like a 1-year waiver. Or they could have done, "You know what? We don't want to fall down this slippery slope. Sorry, everybody, but we can't have COVID related out of state transfers coming into play." That it would have been a kind of a shorter
Yeah.
news cycle for them to deal with. But because it was kind of case by case and there were different rules being applied to different people, whether or not the association intended it, and I don't think they did because they're a bunch of good people, but it just created a big, big mess.
Yeah, and well, let's talk first about the person who kind of started this big mess, and we're talking about Arlen Bruce. And I had a chance to watch Bruce play for multiple seasons. I'm down here in Kansas City, and he played at Olathe North High School. 15 minutes from my house here. Was the Simone Award winner as the top player of the year in the Kansas City metro area last year. Became a top level recruit. Ended up committing to University of Iowa, but when it looked like his senior season wasn't going to happen at North, and ironically, they are playing football now in Olathe North High School. But he made the move to Iowa, where he was originally ruled eligible on a local level, but then he had to sit for 5 weeks because the state association deemed him ineligible. But then, just one day before we're taping this here on October 2nd, you broke the news that he was ruled eligible. So help us break this whole situation down, because on the surface, it seems like his case is going to be kind of the foundation for what other players impacted by ineligibility in Iowa are going to be ruled on. So how did we get to this point?
Yeah, so let's just start from the beginning. He and his mom moved to Ankeny in August when it became clear at the time that Olathe schools weren't going to be playing high school football. So they moved into another house or a house with another family in Ankeny, paying $100 a month rent. So it was somewhat of a sweetheart deal, but it's legit. They're paying rent, they're paying taxes. He is living in the district with his mother, and he's in good academic standing as a student in Ankeny. But on August 28th, the morning of the first game, the association let Arlen Bruce know, "You're not eligible." And the reasons that kind of emerged as why they made him ineligible throughout this whole process was one, his two younger brothers still live in Olathe with a legal guardian uncle. His mom gave legal guardianship of those two sons to her brother before leaving because she knew that the association would look into this. But the association still didn't think that was kosher, that was the good enough reason to move out. The association had issue with the fact that Arlen's mother still every now and then went back to Olathe to see her two sons, so it wasn't like she had done a full move. They thought that the entire family unit should have moved to Kansas if it wasn't a split up family, like a divorce situation or a separation situation. There were a lot of different situations that weren't exactly written in the rule book. The rule book doesn't exactly mention all of these things. All it says is that it needs to be only one residence, so you can't have two full-time residences. And so they were reading into their rules, interpreting that Arlen Bruce and his family had two essential full-time residences because the family was split up in two different situations. So obviously Arlen Bruce and his family disagreed. They got a couple attorneys. They filed for injunctions, two injunctions that would have allowed Arlen to play while this process got sorted out. Both got rejected. They appealed, did a formal appeal to the Iowa Athletic Association. The association denied that. They ruled him ineligible again. It was this whole long process until last Tuesday. They finally got their Department of Education court hearing. And then it just took 2 days, and the judge ruled this seems a little bit absurd. Arlen can play. According to the rules, he can play. And the interesting thing is, during the first injunction, so back when this whole process really started, when the lawyers were trying to say, okay, we know this is going to be a long process, we just want a judge to say Arlen can play while this is going on.
Yeah.
The judge said, you know what? I can't do this yet because Arlen Bruce has reasonable means of appeal because they hadn't filed the formal appeal yet. So I can't say he can play until you guys have used all your resources. But that was like one sentence in the ruling. The whole rest of the ruling was basically this judge saying, look, everything looks good to me, association. I think you should let this guy play. So it's interesting that judge said that in the beginning, and now finally a judge has, in the end, kind of ruled Arlen eligible to play. Again, the association has an insanely difficult job every single year. This year more than others. So at least I'm not saying the association's a bunch of bad guys doing bad things. This was difficult. This was extremely hard. I am not envious of them. But it is interesting just how this whole thing kind of unfolded until the end.
No, you're right, and especially about the high school association situation. So many of these transfer situations, we don't often get to see the everything because they keep some reasonings private and different things like that. But you're right. The high school associations in so many of these situations, they get thrown into and are called the bad guys, and they're punishing they're punishing these kids in these transfer situations. So the Iowa High School Association, they took a lot of flack for this, haven't they?
Yes, they have. And the interesting thing about, at least in Iowa, I'm not sure how it is in other states, but in Iowa, when somebody transfers in, it is not the association's responsibility to look into it.
Yeah.
It is the school's primary responsibility. So if they later find out that person was ineligible, it's on the school. But then two, the association only will look into it if they're asked to, if they're tipped off, if somebody tattles on somebody, or if the school directly asks them to investigate it. So one of the reasons that you had a guy like Arlen Bruce not eligible, meanwhile, at a school called Waukee, his former teammate at Olathe North, Dale Stout, was playing, caught the game-winning touchdown against Ankeny while Arlen Bruce stood on the sidelines. A lot of speculation was because, well, people just don't care as much about Dale Stout because he's not an Iowa recruit. It isn't as big of a deal. So nobody really informed the association of any situation going on with Dale Stout. And that's kind of what happened and led to, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this soon, the other high-profile recruits suddenly being ruled ineligible 4 weeks into the season. Is because people probably said stuff to the association like, hey, Arlen's doing this and he can't play, but because they're doing the same thing and they can. And so the association ruled him ineligible.
Yeah, no, a couple things. Well, we'll get to the other big name here in just a second, but I wanted to circle back. You mentioned that the state association leaves it up initially to each individual school district, each individual school. What did school officials tell you about how they vetted this situation? I mean, obviously I mean, that they had to have vetted the Bruce's situation and to try to figure out if they thought the move was kosher.
Yeah, no, they did. They thought everything was by the book, just like the Bruce family did. That's why, um, in a sworn affidavit from Linda Bruce, Bruce's mother, for the first injunction, she swore that she gave legal guardianship of her sons. There's a document that covers it. So she tried to do that. She swore that she does no longer own a home in Kansas. So she read into the dual residences aspect too. She was pouring through these rules, trying to make sure they did everything right. And she tried to address all of those things in the sworn affidavit. And Ankeny thought everything was kosher too. They thought he's here. He and his mom live here. Her two sons are now technically legal guardianship with an uncle, so everything should be good. The transfer was approved by the Ankeny School District, I believe, a week before the season even started. Um, but from that week until the start of the season, somebody somewhere said something to the association. The association looked into it, and they found information about Arlen that they deemed was not fitting the exception for the contemporaneous parental move to get immediate eligibility, and that's how this whole thing started.
Well, that alone is, we often see other parts of the country that yes, one school will. You mentioned the word tattle, but I think tattle is probably the right way to describe this, and try to get to their school in trouble. I mean, do we know, or will we ever know who
No,
passed it on?
no. I've heard 84 different rumors every day. So I will never know for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
only the person who does knows it.
So his situation, Bruce's situation, all even drew national headlines and drew the attention of the $500 million quarterback Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. He sent out a tweet a few weeks back about letting Bruce play. You know, it's a big deal, not just locally but nationally, when you have the reigning Super Bowl MVP tweeting about this situation.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. I was talking with Arlen after that, saying it's not bad when you've got the Super Bowl MVP saying some stuff about you, like facts. So uh, that was crazy, but I it was cool to get headlines and stuff. The association, I'm sure, didn't read into
Yeah,
it as they shouldn't have.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, this definitely caught national headlines. I know throughout the Midwest, a lot of people were talking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this because there's not a lot going on other than this right now. At least
Yeah.
when this whole thing started. Now there's a whole bunch else going on with with the Big Ten coming back, with Pac-12 coming back, and all that. But when this started, this was one of the biggest sports stories, certainly in the region and in the country.
Yeah, you're right, and that kind of leads us now to the other big name that's been impacted by this whole situation. Kansas State quarterback commitment Jake Ruble, who transferred to West Des Moines Valley from Colorado after they postponed football there in the Rocky Mountain State. And Arlen's a great player. Trust me, Arlen. I had a chance to watch him play. Like I said, for 3 years in Kansas City, he's special. I think he's going to be a great football player for the Hawkeyes. But Jake is the third-ranked quarterback in the country, according to ESPN, a four-star recruit. And I guess as of this point, he still is ineligible. We're taping on October 2nd, so this might change here in a day or so, or maybe even later today. But what blows my mind, Matt, about his situation is that he actually started in three of Valley's games through the first 4 weeks before he was ruled out by the state association. So, like Bruce, walk us through the background on his situation and how is it different if it is than Bruce's?
Yeah. So basically, what happened was the association, I believe, I don't know this for certain, but I believe cleared Ruble before the season started because, of course, when you get a high-profile quarterback coming in the Valley, somebody's going to take the association off. I mean, that's just fact. So they're going to look into it. He was cleared. Valley he played with Valley for the first 4 weeks. They didn't have a great first 4 weeks, but he played. He started, led that team, and then last Wednesday, so 2 Wednesdays ago, midweek before week 5 of the high school football season, they received notification that the association was now ruling him ineligible. And the reasoning that they received was because, one, Jake Ruble's dad still runs his brokerage business in Colorado remotely. So he lives in Iowa, but he still remotely runs the Colorado-based business. Two, the Ruble family still owns its home in the Denver suburbs, and you can go on the Douglas County Assessor's website and see that for yourself. It doesn't take long. So that was an argument, and they said dual residences. So those are kind of the two main things. The Ruble perspective is, one, my dad has employees. He's not just going to quit and let his business fold just because he's moving for me. Yes, he is looking for a job out here right now, but he wasn't just going to ditch all his employees in Colorado. And he's living in Iowa, even though he's running a business remotely. There's a lot of people in Iowa who, work remotely.
Yeah.
So that was his argument there. Then the second argument, dealing with the house, is that his entire family, he says, has moved here. His younger brother goes to elementary school in the West Des Moines Valley School District. And essentially the argument is that if you're saying we can't have two houses, then wouldn't anybody who has a vacation home in Florida not be able to play high school football in Iowa? And I get it's different situations, but that's kind of their argument. So he had an appeal hearing before the association last Friday morning. Got word yesterday, his coach told me that was denied, that he is still ineligible. They are hoping, Jake is hoping, his attorney is hoping, his coach is hoping, that this ruling with Arlen Bruce, that the judge basically overturning the association, will perhaps help Ruble's case in the future. And I did talk with the association's executive director, Tom Keating. He said they fully accept the judge's ruling, that's why they have a process like this, and that they will read the ruling. They'll look into the language, look into the literature, and see if there's anything from that ruling that could affect the current cases like Jake Ruble. There's another one, Mark Gorbatenko, a Division I level prospect at Clear Creek Urbana who transferred in from Illinois. So I'm sure those guys and other transfers who have been ruled ineligible are kind of watching with bated breath right now.
Yeah, and you kind of led me right down the path to the next question is now that we've had Bruce's ruling, do you think we're going to eventually get a green light for Ruble and for the other guys that are impacted like this, or will the state association continue to fight this?
I don't know. That I wish I did know, because I've been asked that a lot. If the association sees something very clear in the language from the Bruce ruling, I think they'll probably reverse some of their own rulings. But if it is a vague situation in that ruling, or if it's made very clear in the ruling that it's specific to Arlen Bruce, I could see them continuing to say that those players are ineligible. And they'll just have to go through the same process that Arlen did. It was about a 4 or 5 week process. By then, it'll be pretty much the state championship weekend.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Again, this is just a unique situation. Everybody's trying to do their best. I know the association is trying to do their best. I know Jake Ruble's attorney is trying to do his best. But it's just a big old mess.
So walk us through what you're thinking here. We're a year removed from the situation. Let's look at some of the long-term ramifications. Do you think we're going to see transfer rules rewritten in Iowa so they do take into account pandemics or weird situations like this? And I know there's other state associations across the country are following Iowa very closely because there are other states that are being impacted. I mean, we had a top quarterback that moved from California, ended up in Georgia, and he's now been ruled ineligible back and forth. So do you think long term that we're going to see some new rules or rewriting of the rule book in some instances?
I think it would be smart to add perhaps a little subsection. When you make a state association handbook, you probably aren't thinking, oh, we should come up with rules in case there's a pandemic. Let's do that. Let's think about that situation. But now we see what happens when there's nothing specifically addressing that. So I do think it would be fair for these state associations, including Iowa, to kind of, once this whole year is done, look back and say, okay, maybe we could add some sort of subsection that says, if there is a pandemic or a situation that displaces a lot of people, or a situation that would prevent high school seniors from finishing their season in one state as opposed to going to another, or perhaps it's even just a bordering state. So they make it so,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
only states that border us, high school seniors can come in, and make it just seniors, because this is an opportunity to finish your high school season. I could see state associations putting that in place to avoid the headache that Iowa is going through right now. Do I think it'll happen? I don't know,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
think I would advocate that happening, just
Yeah,
to help everybody.
yeah, and let's be honest. We all know that the rules are in place for a reason. That these transfer rules are in place so schools don't take advantage, and we get transfers in to help from football or any sport from a competitive advantage. So the rules are there for a reason. It's just as we've discovered throughout this whole pandemic that the rules in many instances are going to have to be rewritten because we've never seen situations like this before.
Right. It was totally unpredictable. But you are right. The spirit of the rule in Iowa is to make it so if there's an Iowa kid who's entering his senior year, and he's been a part of that program for 3 years, worked his butt off, finally got that starting job as a senior. Oh, and that transfer comes in from Illinois and takes his job. That Iowa kid then isn't forced to sit on the sideline and never
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
part. So the spirit of the law is great, and I support it. But like you said, when weird stuff happens, sometimes things got to change, even if
Yeah.
just temporarily.
All right, Matt, before we let you go, you guys have done a great job at the Register putting together a ranking of the top 40 recruits in the state of Iowa. And yes, the three guys that we've been talking about are on the list here. But I think people listening in other parts of the country would be really surprised at one, the quality of high school football in Iowa, and two, just how good this 2021 recruiting class is in Iowa. So there are about 20 plus kids that have already either committed to major Big 10 or Big 12 programs. And the list of players that are ranked by most recruiting services goes 30 deep at 3 stars in Iowa. So just how good is football in Iowa, and what makes this class so special?
Yeah, it's at an all-time high in terms of talent, and I don't necessarily know if the talent is better now or just if the exposure is better now. I've been here
Yeah.
now since 2016. And to me, the talent is just about the same. But before I got here, there wasn't really a recruiting reporter at the Register. I know 24/7 has added a couple guys to really focus on Iowa. They do a great job. And there's just been more exposure now, kind of bringing light to these talented guys. And I think that, I don't know how many people think this, but I do. I think Oliver Martin changed the game.
Okay.
When he was part of that 2016 class, the 4-star Oliver Martin, wide receiver at Iowa City West. Really, it had been a long time since somebody in Iowa had gotten that type of national attention,
Yep.
and that type of national recruiting attention, where there was drama, where there was breaking news, where it was this big deal. Um, and that hadn't happened to Iowa, especially since the age of social media. There had been other guys like Ross Pierschbacher did a late switch to Alabama. You had some other really good players out of Dowling Catholic in previous years, but it wasn't the social media era, which has completely changed the game of recruiting, which has completely changed how coaches across the country see these guys. So when Oliver Martin got on the map, he put Iowa on the map, and he put people who realized there might be some talented people in Iowa on the map. And ever since then, guys like me, we've tried to say, hey, there's a lot of talented people in Iowa, guys at 24/7 Sports, guys all around. Um, I've noticed more kind of out of high school personal trainers popping up in Iowa, trying to, one, promote their brand by getting kids to college, but two, just trying to
Mhm.
help kids get to college. Those are now popping up all over. They're sending film all over to college coaches. You're seeing a lot of coaches notice people because of that. So it's only going up from here. The 2022 class, God, if you had asked me my first year, 2016 in Iowa, hey Matt, come up with a top 40 for the rising senior class and come up with a top 20 for the rising junior class, I would have thought you were dumb.
Well, I've done this for 25 years, Matt, and I remember some years where Iowa would only have five
Yeah.
major FBS level kids, and some of those guys weren't even Big 10 or Big 12 level. So to me, I'm just fascinated how there's just been for one reason or another, there's been this type of exposure in the state of Iowa, and I love it. I think it's a great thing. So, who's your favorite recruit in this class? I mean, everybody gets to. I mean, you cover recruiting, you get to know a prospect on and off the field a little bit here and there. Is there a guy that you just know is going to be a success no matter what his ranking is in this class?
TJ Bowlers going to Wisconsin. That is, kid comes from as good as a family as there is. If he wasn't playing football, he'd be an engineer somewhere, just making the world a better place. Just a really, really, really good kid. And then, oh, by the way, he's a monster on the football field who Alabama really wanted. And if COVID hadn't happened, if he was able to visit Alabama, who knows what would have happened there. But TJ Bowlers is going to be a monster up at Wisconsin. Looking forward to seeing what he does. I also really think Brody Brecht, the receiver who is going to Iowa, is going to be great. And then Henry Lutovsky. He doesn't get enough credit going to Nebraska. Offensive lineman out of Mount Pleasant, committed to Nebraska really early in the process, but he held an offer from Georgia. Lots of schools were looking at him. He's like 6'4", 310 pounds, and a very small amount of that is body fat. Wow. He is a freak athlete. So those three guys kind of jump out to me. And, of course, Thomas Fedoni going to Nebraska.
He's pretty special, too. So is there one battle left in the state that or is there a sleeper or somebody that you really – are kind of excited about getting to cover here until we have early signing day in mid-December?
Yeah, I like Aaron Smith out of Waukee. He's a 5'11", 170-pound kind of smaller guy. He's an athlete. He plays DB, wide receiver, running back, kind of all of the above. If he was 6'1" right now, he'd already have Big Ten offers. But he's got up to 20 kind of Group of 5 FCS Ivy League offers. And Power 5 interest from the likes of Nebraska, Iowa, Iowa State, Kansas State, kind of all looking at him. Notre Dame called him last week. But he's just having such a phenomenal season. When he touches the ball, it is an immediate potential for a touchdown. He's the early favorite for the 100-meter sprint in the state. He's the fastest guy in Iowa. He's also got some really good football IQ. He's averaging 22.2 yards per touch. When he touches the ball, he gets 20 yards. And he's playing the toughest schedule in the state. Central Iowa, the CIML, the Des Moines area schools, that's the toughest schedule. And it's the biggest class 4A. So he's not doing this against like 1A competition. So will he eventually get a Power 5 offer? I don't know. They're getting more and more interested, but I'm excited to see what he can do. We've got him ranked 29th in the top 40 right now. He's making a strong case for the top 25. And I'm just very curious to see what he does.
Yeah, Matt, I think we could talk about this all day long here. I think this is a truly fascinating subject, not just with the transfers and the ineligibility and eligibility battles, but just the quality of talent that is in the state of Iowa in this 2021. And as you alluded to, the 2022 class is also going to be really, really special. And I guess I would have never guessed when I was sitting down planning podcasts this season that we will be talking about Iowa high school football, but here we are. So tell folks how they can follow your work the rest of this high school football and recruiting season.
Yeah, so you can just go to DesMoinesRegister.com or follow me on Twitter, Matthew Bain _. Somebody named Matthew Bain who works at Georgia Tech, got it in 2012 before I ever got on. So I'm Matthew Bain _. So they can follow everything I do there and follow Des Moines Register, Des Moines Register Sports. We got a lot of talented people covering this state.
Yeah, you guys do an outstanding job. And as a former newspaper guy myself at the Kansas City Star, I love it. And I absolutely love that there still is a commitment to covering local high school football and local high school sports by the hometown, the state newspaper. And I wish we saw more of that across the country. But obviously, we live in a different world, and that's almost a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But you guys at the Register just do an outstanding job, and I definitely recommend you guys giving Matt a follow. We'll tweet out links to the Register, or I will tweet out links to the Register and to your Twitter handle. Make sure to get you some additional followers because you do an outstanding job, and I can't appreciate you enough trying to break this whole situation down for us. And I feel like you're gonna be busy here for the next couple of weeks until this whole thing kind of shovels itself out.
Yeah, we got Bruce resolved. Now it's on to Ruble. So I will call the mirror right now. We'll see what happens.
All right. Okay, folks. Well, we covered a lot of stuff, great stuff here in this episode of Over the Middle, but we're just getting started. We're going to continue to take that deep dive into the impacts COVID-19 has had on high school football college football and the recruiting process. We got some great guests lined up that'll help us continue to examine this new world that we're living in. I hope you'll be back with us again next week, and also hope you take some time to watch some high school football this week. Don't forget, we've got some great games lined up on YourView. Head over to watch.yourview.com. That's watch.yourdiew.com, and you'll be able to catch some of the top high school football matchups all season long. I'm Jeremy Crabtree, and thanks again for listening to us here on Over the Middle.